I'm ready for this.
It's been a long day.
Oh man, it's been chaos.
Look like you're going to cry.
I'm gonna let you do it, mate. To be honest.
All right, no worries.
Because my head, I need to just.
It's all right, you have a brew. Hello and welcome back to the Renewables podcast. We are here again with another fantastic guest, but before we go to speak to them, how are you doing, Sam?
Not well. Which I was supposed to bring us in on this, but I've chickened out of it because I don't know. I've raced back here. I'm half an hour late. It just shows trying to juggle all these different things is difficult, isn't it? But yeah, no, I am good. I'm enjoying the weather, but just raced about today, and I'm glad to now be sat on the sofa with you two. Going to get into some really good chat.
So we can get you back into your zen as we calm you down with a chat about switchgear with Pete. How are you doing, Pete?
I'm very well, thanks. Very well.
Yeah, so Pete's back again to chat with us. We came to visit you guys in your lovely facility earlier on. It was last year now, wasn't it? To have a chat about switchgear, and we've had a few questions through the show about that.
Right.
And some things that Sam's raised as well. So we want to speak a little bit about that. Before we get into it, though, how's business? Are you doing well at the minute?
Yeah, we're really busy, which is good. Obviously, just coming off the kind of the bottom end of the curve of the initial launch of the consumer unit. So I think it's been pretty well received. I know you two both installed them, and your feedback's been pretty positive. So that seems to be the general consensus that we've done a good job at least. So long may that continue.
Yeah, so for those people who maybe don't know, listening and watching to this, it's kind of Pete who's brought this new product forward with his team to market through CEF of the consumer unit that me and Sam have been speaking a little bit about on the show, because obviously you guys are our sponsors and we've been fitting lots of them in the day job. So you're really trying to get that out there into the marketplace, that we've got this new product available, and there is some interesting angles of discussion on that we can have around something you'd mentioned, Sam, on a podcast not that long ago.
Yeah. This is the thing, isn't it? It's I feel like Proteus always had the actual internals of the consumer units fairly well sorted, like the bi-directional side of things, which obviously was massively planned by you guys and
really planned. Yeah. that was me personally.
You're personally taking responsibility. So all that sort of stuff was there, but the board was ready for an uplift and ready for kind of the more modern, sleeker look, which we've had really good feedback from other installers that have tried it, and we really love it as well, and for a lot of reasons. And I know some of the reasons that we were like, oh, that could be improved. I've just learned before this podcast they're already been changed, so that's really good as well. But the actual main topic, or one of the main topics of this conversation, was around the actual ratings of the consumer unit, because we're in this world of prosumer world where we're buying power in from the grid, as we always have done, but we're also now generating our own power, storing our own power, and maybe even discharging our own power from EVs and things in the not too distant future. That suddenly, do we need to start looking at these consumer units of being more than 100 amp rated to allow homes to actually have a compliant consumer unit that can effectively buy in 100 amps of power, but actually then also handle power flying around from batteries and solar and everything else. So that was a question that I think was it at the launch?
It was at the contractor launch event.
Yeah, and then we've had a conversation about it on the podcast as well, haven't we? So yeah, I feel like it's one of those questions out there that everyone's kind of semi-aware of that's been asked, but no one's kind of gone, this is the definitive way forward. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out over the next year or so.
Yeah, Graham Kenyon, I think, did a talk on that on our podcast and in other stuff he's done out in industry around splitting out some of the renewables aspects to a separate board to try and counteract against that. But obviously that's more time, labour, materials. It's not an ideal setup aesthetically as well, and a lot of the customers we deal with are really keen on these things looking as nice and neat as possible. So getting it all into one box seems like an easy thing to do, but of course we don't know anything about product standards or any of these rules and regulations of consumer units. So I guess first up, Pete, is it even possible for these things to be over 100 amps?
Well, again, I wouldn't like to take too much credit for it. It was Sam who brought it up to me at the contractor launch event. But not only that, in the same week I had an email come through asking whether or not our board was rated up to 125 amps. So with a lot of the flexibility we've got, what we can do in-house, the testing that we can do, we thought, well, there's only one way to find out, and let's test it. So we've tested the isolator, the buzz bar, and the assembly, and it all works to 125 amps. So if you need one, obviously we're happy to provide it on that basis. The only thing I would say, mentioned to you just before, is the isolator's printed at 100 amp. So from a marketing standpoint, it's going to be pretty difficult because it's like saying, oh yeah, we can do it, but it doesn't actually look like you can. So that's easy enough to do. We can get some isolators printed as 125 amp, and we'd have to have a look on what was best placed for us, whether we'd want to do that as just our standard and it's 125 amp as standard, or whether we just had a separate range just for the renewable side, really. But yeah, we're confident that we can do it from the kind of the in-house testing we've done. So
yeah, I think it's a really good step forward, because if nothing else, it shows that kind of step towards considering these boards needing to be rated more than 100 amps. And for me personally, I would love boards to be, if we just said 200 amp rated. Now it's very easy for me to say that.
Give him an inch, he'll take it out.
Yeah.
If it gets 200 amp, they might take it off me and put it into industrial.
Yeah,
I don't want it to go too hot.
But the reason being, it's we are seeing, I think our standard set of inverters now tends to be 5, like domestically, single phase can be sort of 5 to 10 kilowatts. And we're then also seeing, people looking really seriously at vehicle to home as well, and vehicle to grid. And so all of this stuff, if it can be in one consumer unit, fantastic. Now, when you've got a hybrid solar and battery system at 40 amps, and you've got an EV charger that potentially can discharge at 40 amps, there's 80 amps straight off. So it's trying to get that. It's trying to get right. Do we say to everybody now that because of the current rating, we have to fit, a vehicle to grid charger in a separate board, because simply there's not anything on the market? Because even if you did you need to have like a massive panel board or something to get up to that sort of current rating, wouldn't you? So it's a really good point that we can get to 125 amps on that board. I'm really keen to hear if it's something that you know about. What was is it just the current carrying capacity of the copper components and the switchgear in there, or is it like a heat buildup? Because I've spoken to other people about it, and they said the worrying thing is actually the heat buildup within that enclosure that kind of limits it, or is it simply the bus bars and things?
Admittedly, I'm not 100% sure on that, but I suppose like anything, the kind of the temperature rise test we do is to test the switchgear, the enclosure, the whole kind of product we're offering, over that time period. So that's all part of the heat buildup as well. So if it couldn't manage the heat buildup, then it would fail that test. So it made it a bit of both. To be fair. Yeah. I'm not an expert, admittedly, on the testing. Yeah, you'd have to get Bruno on for that. So
yeah. Well, I know like we both of us seen, Mark, I'm sure, boards that are running hot, where you've gone to properties and you've got they've got 2 electric showers. They're on 40, 50 amp breakers, and you're thinking, you have a chat to them and go, do you use these both quite a lot? Oh yeah, we use them all the time. And you think, oh my Lord, this is running hot. And you can actually see discolouring of switch gear and things like that. So as we go electric in our homes, I think the rating of the boards is going to be a really key thing, because you've got heat pumps. You're taking away the gas side of things, or the oil, which is the main source of the heat for that house, and putting a heat pump in there, as well as all this other stuff. It's kind of like, how do we develop this into making sure that not only renewables companies can be fitting the right equipment when we come to do our work, but when someone does a rewire and they maybe don't do anything with heat pumps and solar, how can they fit the right board to allow that job to be done easier in the future? Because even though there's a lot of people entering this market, there'll be a lot that will just stay out of it because they're not that interested in the whole renewable side. They're busy doing their rewires or their industrial fit outs or commercial fit outs, and just want to use a specialist company to do their solar work or their heat pump work or the battery work. But it would make everyone's life so much easier if like you guys have said, we know as installers that board can do 125 amps, can happily have 125 amps flowing around it. That might make the difference between someone go, I'm going to fit that board because I know that this property may in the future actually want to have heat pump, solar, battery, and we're starting to see it on new builds. So you kind of think, well, why doesn't everyone start fitting boards that have a higher current rating in preparation for it?
It makes sense, doesn't it? And the vehicle to grid one is a great point in that, because the 25 kilowatts, generally the ones I've seen in their rating, which in and of themselves kind of puts you up there, beyond the rating of a typical consumer unit. It's that transfer of power. It's all right that the car might be sending 25 kilowatts to the house, but it might not be parked on the drive for long. So they want to do that at full rating for maybe an hour, fill the batteries up, run the heat pump, get the electric shower on, whatever else people are doing in their homes. So there will be a likelihood that that's going to ultimately travel through the consumer unit on the final circuits into the property, and having switchgear that can carry that is essential, because without it, you end up with this hodgepodge of different boards all over the place. I think that's a key approach with all
the
of that.
footprint of it, isn't it? The side of a house or wherever it may be. That's what we need to avoid, really.
It is, and the main switch, again, that's one of the things as electricians we want is products to solve the problems, and main switch is consistently carrying that demand for a prolonged period. We want to know that they're able to withstand it. So I've seen the marketing you guys have had out the last few weeks, and obviously knowing the product like we do with the extended terminal capacity, the 2 screws, the rapid shape, it's all allowing that more secure connection, because we're not just seeing those short windows of peak demand where you might get 60 amps when someone's in the electric shower. This could be an EV charger and a heat pump running for 5-6 hours, carrying 60-70 amps. You want that main switch to be absolutely tightened up properly for the long term, don't you?
Yeah, you do, and I think it's one of those things where choosing the right switchgear is kind of the first step to that property's flexibility over the future. So choosing a board that has 125 amp rating, or has the right, even just forget about the 125 amp rating, that just has the right RCBOs that are bi-directional, and like I've just this job I've just flown from today has a Hager board in, but annoyingly the RCD for that is a double module one. So luckily this board has a lot of spare ways, but for that EV charger we needed a double module way, and I was just thinking, thank God this property has like 4 or 5 spare ways, because that would have been an absolute nightmare. So just choosing the right boards to give you that flexibility, like the type B RCBO and everything else that the board has, it just makes our life easier. It might be quite selfish for us if, as being in the renewables sector and being biased towards it, but if we walk into a property and the switchgear is easy to get and it's not like £1 million for an RCBO, then just makes our life so much easier, and therefore makes the job cheaper for the customer because it's been installed and thought about right at the start.
Yeah, I think at the minute, well, we're still with lots of people driving around in petrol cars, and there's still lots of gas ovens and hobs and things. Generally, the peak you see is around 40 amps or so, isn't it? And if you incorporate solar and battery storage, that can come ever lower because the batteries take the bumps out. If we forward the time sort of 5-10 years, when there's people with all these electric vehicles and it's all electric cooking and heating, those peaks are going to start getting up there. And I think having the right switchgear is a good move towards future-proofing against that. And we're certainly looking at that on all of our installs. I'm sure you are, Sam, as well. When we're going in, fitting switchgear now, we're thinking about, are the customer going to have a heat pump in the next year or so? Are we allowing provision for that to be installed and integrate with a kit? So I think it's the right way to go. As with everything in the electrical industry, it'll probably be a slow process. But it's interesting to see that Proteus have had that out of the box by accident. I guess the markings is similar to the bi-directional RCBOs, because your product did that. Didn't have the right markings on it, and now industry made all those changes. Markings and such. It's the same with your main switch, maybe as well.
Yeah. I mean, that's all worked its way through now, thankfully. So everything that's going out the building now will have the correct markings. But yeah, it's the same thing, isn't it? Just how you get your message out there. We were in a position with the bi-directional where if we had a question come, we knew what the answer was. There was no real problem with it. The device itself had the test circuit on the side, so you knew it was working, and you could still prove it was bi-directional. But it just has that bit of time and that reaction to get it changed over was all we needed, really. And it'll be the same with the main switch, I guess.
Yeah, I think what I'd like to do is just take what I've realised is that we've maybe not fully explained this 100 amp thing. Obviously, we know through having the conversations, and obviously me and you might doing the podcast. But one thing that might be worth us checking in with people watching now is explaining a little bit as to what components we're worried about with the 100 amp rating and considerations that we look at when we're looking at fitting a board, because we've obviously still got the same restrictions on the main fuse size. A lot of places now have 80 amps, so we're not worried about importing more than 80 amps or really exporting more than 80 amps, because that main fuse is going to be at threat no matter what. The whole reason for the question at the launch of this and that podcast was it's more about that power flying around on that internal bus bar, really, isn't it? And between the devices, because we're injecting 32 amps, 20 amps, whatever, 16 amps onto that bus bar, and that gives the neighbouring circuits two points to draw current from. So it gives it, or more if it's a separate solar PV system, separate battery system, potentially separate EV charger that is bidirectional, and the grid. So we might have 4 or 5 points, over that property's lifetime. So what we basically posed on that podcast and what the question was about was really about how do we uprate the size of this, the current rating of this enclosure and the devices and everything to allow for that heat dissipation. Does it need like massive great cooling fittings? It's such a wild. It feels wild to be talking about it, but you can quite easily see how things are going to progress with this sort of stuff. It's just gonna kind of boom, and that's why I'm so glad that this has got a higher current rating than 100 amps, and we'll see if others follow suit or not really.
Yeah, well, demand's demand, isn't it? At the end of the day, so if you've got that consumption within a home, it'll be getting drawn anyway. You said about the 2 showers running in somebody's house, and 100 amp service fuse will sit a lot more current than that. And I'm pretty certain that there will be consumer units out there that have been carrying over 100 amps, designed to or otherwise, because that service fuse will carry the current for a bit of time. The main switch isn't an MCB, is it? It's just a switch disconnector. It's probably had that on more than one occasion nationally happening every day without renewables. But if you throw in sort of a gateway, and you could have your vehicle to grid going into that, you could have a couple of inverters. It's not a case just one. You might have a PV inverter, you might have a couple of battery stacks with inverters, and then you've got your house consumer unit trying to draw down the power from that. It's that transfer of energy that could still go through that main switch to those final circuits and beyond. You might end up with 125 amps on there because you're running from your car, you're running from your battery stacks, you've got your heat pump going, you've got your showers going, swimming pool, hot tub, whatever it is, and you end up with 115 amps on the bus bar, on the main switch, and all the heat accumulating in there. So it's good to have that, and I think it is all to do with the heat dissipation largely, and maybe there's elements of spacing that you might account for a little bit better in there, so you maybe won't want to go with a tiny little 6-way board if it's even possible to get enough circuit breakers in there and have all 6 of them running fully loaded at 125 amps. You probably need to be looking at a larger board and spreading them out and trying to get the natural airflow in the enclosure. So it's still design considerations for us. We can't rely on you as manufacturers to say, go and screw that to the wall, it's 125 amps. It can carry the current, but we need to decide how it's actually fitted.
I think obviously with ours, there's plenty of working spaces. There always has been. You've got the compact RCBO as well, which is just the standard. So talk about like space around the switchgear, as it were. Probably one of the better boards to have for space, if I'm honest. So there's plenty of working room and plenty of space probably for that heat dissipation to naturally happen within the board. Anyway,
it's the ambient temperature as well, isn't it? So it's if you've got it in a cooler environment or if you're in a warmer plant room, because we have that with other switchgear that we've placed into these plant rooms that are housing controls for swimming pools and stuff, they're naturally quite warm. That is a factor because your ambient temperature could be getting up towards 40 degrees, they're more humid. All of those factors play a part in our design choices. That doesn't change just because the product can carry 125 amps. It's up to us to take a view on that as installers. But I think it's a really good option, and I wasn't expecting to get that answer, if I'm honest. I was fully expecting Pete to come and say, no, it's 100 amps, you can't do it.
Yeah.
Like, that's what it is. And, it's great that we can have confidence now But
Yeah.
we're fitting this stuff. We've got a little bit more to play with than we thought.
Designed with the installer in mind.
Yeah.
There we go. Yeah, no, absolutely. It's nice. It's a good tick in the box, and it's a good step towards that kind of considering that extra carrying capacity that's needed for the house of over the next 10 years that we're all going to be, probably involved with putting solar on, heat pumps on, all that other sort of good stuff that we seem to be on that trajectory to installing for a lot of these properties. The ambient temperatures one is a really good point. Takes me back to an install we did, and it was a big ground mounted solar PV system with battery storage, and it was like wasn't supposed to be a plant room, but it quickly developed into a plant room. But it had underfloor heating, it was heavily insulated, and we had 6 battery stacks, 2 big solar inverters, and this room just got really hot, running as hot as it running as hard as it could, and we commissioned it during the summertime as well, so it was really pounding, and that caused the circuit protection to trip because the ambient temperature was just going up through the roof. So we did put some spacing in, but we increased that even more, and the customer actually put some air conditioning into the room as well. But it was basically like a big server room by the end of it. So it was, all those considerations, you don't always catch them all, but like you say, having the space and giving yourself the best chance to actually get that airflow through the board and give it enough space to dissipate that heat is really important. And there is a good amount of space in those boards, which is really nice. But you were mentioning also, Pete, that you'd made some changes to the board since its initial launch.
Like anything, I think you bring something out and you never really know whether you've done the right thing. You can do all the R&D in the world that you want and you think is the right thing to do. And we don't just react to one person making a comment, but if there's a little bit of feedback that's kind of developing a pattern, obviously we'll take that on board. So a couple of things really. I think the main one that we had was the knockout size of the main incoming knockout. We'd brought in at 40 mil, sorry, not 40 amp, 40 mil. And people preferred the 32 mil. So again, bit of repeat feedback, and we thought it's easy to change. So we did that. We've added in a dim rail stop as well. So when obviously all the devices are all in place, just that slide that they can have across the kind of the full dim rail setup just made it a little bit more difficult to put your lid on. So again, pop a little stop on there and that gets rid of that. There's been some other little changes to just label set. Oh, you're missing this or whatever. So nothing major in that sense. But the main thing from our point of view is that continuous development. We want to offer you, the installer, the board you want to install. So if you've got any problems with it, and this, not just yourselves, but whoever's listening or watching, just let us know. Send us a message on social media, give us a call, because it's all really important to us. It's not just been subbed out to a third party to build, it's been built in-house. We've manufactured it ourselves, we've designed it ourselves. So we've got the flexibility to make these changes if we need to. And hopefully we'll reach a point where it's the absolute utopia that everyone wants to install, but, got to be realistic. Manage your expectations maybe. But look, we're trying to offer what we think is the best board we can, basically.
Yeah, I mean that's all you can do when you bring a product out, isn't it? It's take the feedback in, and there'll be a lot of people that don't, a lot of companies that don't take that feedback in and just think that they have got the best board out there already. And the reality is it's impossible unless you're very, very lucky to actually have all of those points nailed, because like we've been talking about on here, the environment changes as to what installers want for their boards. Nobody, if you'd have asked people 5 years ago, nobody would have even known what a bidirectional RCD was or RCBO was. All these things change, and so people are drawn to new products because of what they're facing as an installer. And there is a huge amount of tribalism in terms of the board that you've always fitted, and that's obviously a big challenge with people deciding to take the leap from one brand to another to try out and to hopefully continue installing, and that's a kind of a course that we've been through with different boards and what have you. And one of the points I was going to raise to you today was about the DIN rail stopper, because we'd had that where the tails come up and it just pushed the main switch to the right a little bit. It just made the the front cover be a little bit more awkward to put on. And then, as I was literally going to say it before we were recording, you said, "Oh yeah, we've made a couple of changes. One was the din rail stuff." I went, "Oh well, that's my talking point done." so it's really good. All you can do is listen to that feedback.
That may have actually came up at the contractor event.
Ah, right, okay.
Not 100%.
I think it did. I think it was Dan who said that.
Yeah, I feel like it did, because I feel like that was one thing we had, and it was like, there's already a load on the way, but let's get it changed. And it was changed quite quickly.
Yeah.
But you just obviously have a little bit of time for stock and stuff to work through the system. So
Do you think that's why you end up a little bit ahead of the rest of the crowd in the switchgear game with some of your products, that you are listening to contractors in the way you are? Because you've got the single module Type B RCBO, the bi-directional RCBOs. You've got the Type A and double pole elements in there covered, if not first, among the first. Is that because you're listening to installers? Is it pot luck? It's kind of driving that.
Well, bi-directional was definitely luck. Wouldn't like to, but we would first. But it was definitely a little bit of luck involved in that. But I think definitely. I mean, at the end of the day, we're manufacturers. We see things online. We build our knowledge base however we can. But at the end of the day, we're not out on site installing. So who are we to say what's best to install? So working with guys like yourself, and just obviously through our sales team, contractors around the country picking up feedback is obviously vital to what we do. And part of the marketing we've had for the launch is brought to market with contractors, because it wasn't just something we pushed out there without any feedback from contractors we know and trust. So it's definitely a key part of kind of the mantra of what we've got.
Do you see sort of renewables in particular? I'm thinking heat pumps, solar, EV chargers, sort of driving the range that you're working on. Is that like a big focal point of your business?
Well, I think so, because obviously, what we've done, and one of the main parts of the launch was, everything's bi-directional, it's all compact double pole. You don't have to have two part numbers, and we kind of got rid of the single pole variant, the non-bi-directional, because we were thinking, well, look, this is where the market's going to go. And, we know where the regs are currently, where the regs will be in 2 years, 3 years. It may just be that the pattern of behaviour changes. You don't necessarily need it to be bi-directional, but might as well just make it bi-directional because it just makes sense. We saw it with Type A, didn't we? It started off, it wasn't a regulation. It could still do AC, but people were just like, well, yeah, but you might need it, so it's better to do it than not. So we just thought, let's just condense everything and make everything as easy as possible. And I think renewables, the space of renewables, you can see quite clearly that's the future and where the market's going to go. So let's just jump on board and be the go-to guys for it. And I think we pretty much are. When you look at the renewables sector, but probably most companies and most big companies, they're kind of go-to manufacturer choice at the minute, which is quite a good position to be in.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking at EV charge points at a 3-phase level with that 4-pole RCBO you guys have got that goes straight in a spine board 3-phase, that's a game changer for us as installers. It's such an easier job when you can do that than messing about with additional enclosures. And then again, at a single phase level, with the Type B and Type A in the range, it's helpful with both EV and heat pumps. And I know there's things that have been worked on at the minute around that as well. You've had a bit of trouble with a heat pump over the last week or so, haven't you, Sam? So there's different requirements from different manufacturers, and that's difficult for us as installers, but also for you, I imagine, as well in switchgear, Pete. It's like, got one manufacturer who wants a certain element of circuit protection and another one that wants a different one. What do we need to focus on, really? It's like
it's really tricky, and that was all part of our journey when we did the heat pump the other week, where literally the night before I was like making sure I had everything, and then there's this weird little thing in the heat pump manual that said, obviously manuals always contradict themselves, don't they? So it was on about a Type B RCD, but then it said in the manual that it was if required, but then on the data sheet it said must be installed. So I had a conversation with Valiant technical support, and they said, no, whatever you're doing, you need a Type B plus RCD. I was like, what's B plus? And
that's my reaction a few months ago.
What's B plus? I thought it was just Type B. Oh no, you need a Type B RCD, but one that is suitable for heat pumps. And he said some companies call them a BHP for heat pump and stuff. God, how many different RCDs do we need in the industry? It's just and that's a journey that probably a lot of us as electricians will be going on over the next 5 years as more of these heat pumps get installed and trying to make sure that we're at the right side of the regulations. But it's just another example of like of industry moving so quick and all these different parties contributing to what needs to be installed. Because it's the first time I'd ever heard of a B plus RCD or a BHP RCD. Have you ever heard of?
No, I think there must be elements in there of like product manufacturers making stuff as cheaply as they can and passing on the problem to us as installers, and by default you as a switchgear manufacturer to overcome. I'm sure there must be something they can do in the manufacturing of a heat pump for it not to need that level of protection. There has to be, and you know we see it with like tumble dryers and washing machines. They get ever cheaper when we need all this other stuff to make sure they don't catch on fire. Why not solve the problem at source? Maybe I'm being harsh towards the manufacturers.
No, I'm supplying enough heat pumps that are working with the regular Type B, so I think you're probably not barking up the wrong tree there. So I think you're onto something. But yeah, we're obviously working on it similarly to you. I got asked for it. I can't remember how many months ago, maybe 3 or 4 months ago, and it was like I literally don't know what that is. But like anything, you know, you do a bit of research in it, and you know, bit of the kind of the R&D and the testing work that we needed to do to convert our regular B into a B plus. So we're kind of in the final throes of testing on that. So it's 2 kind of main elements to it. It's got to work to 20 kilohertz. You know, the device that we've got coming out soon, maybe out by the time this gets released. I don't know. We're kind of that close. Definitely working to 20 kilohertz. It's just that final point on. It's got to be minimum trigger point of
150 milliamp
at 1 kilohertz.
Yeah.
So ours works perfectly to 1 kilohertz, but it's just that element at the minute they're working on. So hopefully, fingers crossed, that'll be coming soon. And dovetailed in with that, I've been asking them to work as well on the kind of the single module. So when we bring it out, hopefully, it won't just be the RCD, the single module RCBO. Not 100% on that just yet. Hopefully, that's what we're working on anyway. We're trying to, again, because ultimately the utopia solution for everyone is if you can get that single module BHP or whatever it's called, B plus, you know, that's obviously where we need to be, at least for now anyway. Yeah, where we'll be in a year or so, 2 years' time, who knows? But.
Yeah, and that's exactly what you want as an installer if you've got a board, because the reality is a lot of these installs where people are fitting heat pumps, it's probably going to be a heat pump with you know, an EV charger and I mean that for us as an install company as Oval, we're wanting to basically do like solar battery heat pump EV, and so we'd be looking at that. Obviously, we'd have to assess the current rating like we've just been talking about, but we want basically a board where we can just put Type B plus in or whatever it ended up being called for the heat pump. You know, a bidirectional RCBO for the solar, a double pole bidirectional RCBO for the EV charger, and not have to have all these little subboards because this brand does that, but they don't do that type of switch gear. And suddenly you've got like this. You go, there you go, Mrs. Smith. There's your solar battery, EV, and heat pump install, and she's got like 4 separate consumer units under her stairs or something. And that's the other thing that we're struggling with in the UK is space. And we're already limited with the PAS 63100 documents to where we can put solar, like solar battery and all that sort of stuff. It's kind of, if we're also limited by the equipment and the switchgear that are out there as to what brands we have to fit and have to have 3 or 4 different brands to satisfy the regs, suddenly we've not only had to squeeze all of our battery and inverter equipment into the one space on the property that will comply, we've also had to allow enough space for kind of all these different consumer units and metering and everything else. So all of that just makes an installer's life so much more difficult. So if you get a board that you know has all of these different elements in, then you can kind of go, right, well, if they add a heat pump in the future, I'm going to choose this board because I've already been talking about it and I know they have a Type B plus RCBO, which is going to make our life so much easier. So that, I think, for responsible installers is a really important kind of thing to have in the back of the mind. But it's also shouting about it, isn't it? So that it's all.
That's we spoke earlier, isn't it? A lot of these things, it's training, it's how you get the message around. You know, we can only do so much with social media. It's, you know, we have to try our best to get that message out there. Because we spoke about the dual screw isolator, didn't we? And we're like, that is, you know, we've had it for years and years and years, but that is such a key message that we need to get out, and it's how you get that out in the most effective way, really, across the UK.
Yeah, I loved that post you guys had shared. I think I'd seen it on LinkedIn fully explaining what that was,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
we'd obviously been showing it at the product launch, and I've seen it in the kit we've fitted, but some of it you take for granted that it's actually like a patented thing that you've
Yeah.
got, and it's not just that it's 2 screws, it's the shape of the terminal and the depth of it as well. And when you bring all of those things together, you know, it's a killer product that you've got. But awareness around contractors is the key part of that, because it's not common knowledge, unfortunately. And
No.
you know, you've got that superpower of CEF alongside you guys, and with CEF Live coming up at the start of June, isn't it? I think early June, where that
56,
is.
yeah.
And the website and all of their wholesale network, that's a key place for you getting that message out front and centre.
Yeah.
So I'll be having that printed out and stuck everywhere, Pete, if I was you.
Well, I said, I think we're going to look at some like training aids for flyers and stuff to get out into the branch network. But yeah, I mean, CF Live will obviously be making a big song and dance about it. We've got a massive stand that Spencer and his team have put together. So really excited for that. I think you're joining us as well, aren't you, for a little
I am.
chat
yeah.
with...
Someone said there was an ice cream machine and some beer.
There's an ice cream machine.
I was there.
Yeah, there's an ice cream machine. I'll plug him. It's we've got a local business from Redditch who's doing that for us. So so it's going to be really good. We've also got I won't reveal too much.
No, don't give it all the
No,
secrets.
Spencer
away.
will.
He'll be telling you off.
But
no,
you probably already won't be happy with what I've already said. So.
No, it's a really good product, and I know from my experience, I've had so many main switches burnt out over the years. Not ones I've fitted, by the way, but maybe 1 or 2 even. That, you know, best will in the world, those terminals will work loose if regular inspections aren't carried out. You can fit them up nice and tight, but if it's left 10, 15 years, the natural movement.
We saw a lot of it initially with the smart meter roll up when that came, because you had obviously a meter installer doing one side, consumer unit installer doing the other side, and that manipulation of the towers between the two was what was causing a lot of the problems. So, you know, obviously we have had that product since, I'm not sure it was before I was with the business anyway, maybe late 2000s. We first brought it out as a meter in isolator, and then obviously brought it into the consumer unit in 2012. So, but we only ever had it in the M2 brand, you see, which was only a smaller part of our business. So, first time with this relaunch that we brought it into Proteus, which is obviously our biggest selling brand. But you know, we're probably talking 2 million plus terminals over the years that have gone out, you know, all around the country. All the utility companies have been installing them. So, you know, very confident in the quality of the product and the safety it can offer.
Yeah. So you got that product experience and feedback already haven't you, from the meter.
Yeah, it's not like although it's new to the consumer unit, it's nowhere near a new product really. So.
Yeah, it's a great feature, and I'm sure you'll have seen similar things to what I have. So an electrician's listening to this, exactly the same. It's the point that carries the most load. It's the point that's weakest when something does go wrong. It's generally the thing that sets an old plastic consumer unit on fire.
Yeah, it is, and like you mentioned there, Pete, about, you know, just if you don't have to do much with certainly the non-flexible version of these meter tails, you don't have to do much with them to just reposition the inner core slightly, you know, just by manipulate the tails a little bit, and suddenly it feels like the cage is just completely open on a lot of these main switches. You give it a tighten, torque it up, take your tails, and you go, oh, I'll just twist that way. I'll just recheck my tails, and you're like, get another couple of turns on this, and that slight bit of manipulation as you bend it, and it just repositions those inner cores slightly. Suddenly, you've got another turn or two on that, and you think, oh, we've got an EV charger in this, we've got an electric shower and everything, and suddenly that'll be running hot for and realistically, what domestic customers ever get their electrics checked?
Not enough of them.
Not enough. You know, it's crazy until something goes wrong, and you don't want to be on the wrong side of that sort of at that sort of level. So
fortunately, when I had my new consumer unit last year in my house, I had one of our own put on, so I know I'm safe.
You know, you're good.
yeah.
I mean, it's 2 ways of approaching that. I know other manufacturers have gone with like your tails clamps. You guys haven't, because there's no real need for it. You've got the 2 terminals, and you're confident in the security of the connection. If we gland our cables in correctly, there's no real need for a tails clamp. And having struggled with some of these other tail clamps in other boards, they don't always go where they should anyway. So I think that's probably the right way to go. It gives you an extra reassurance on a TT system as well, because some people don't want to fit the time-delayed RCD in advance of the consumer unit. You know, we don't have to do that with regs anymore. The worry is if those tails become loose and start touching the casing and things, you've not got adequate protection. But with the 2 points of fixings in a round shape, I think that's as good as you're going to get, isn't it? To be honest.
Yeah, because with the, and I know this is like a massive segment on like cage chat, isn't it? But that's just, we're nerding out on it. But when you actually look at a cable in the cage, it on like a square cage, it manipulates the inner cores in a form that is not natural to that cable, and you end up with space in that cage at all times because it can only change a cylindrical kind of form of the copper into a square cage. It can only do that to a certain level. So that's like where I mentioned about, and you mentioned about, when you just alter the position of the cable slightly, and it's got all this free space for that core just to slip into that spare space, and then suddenly that's a loose connection. And you can be at home sleeping, because it all keeps us up at night as electricians about loose connections. You can be there sleeping going, no, definitely talked all of those connections. I even marked it. If you just have to, lose a bit of slack somewhere or something, and you've moved that cable, you want the main switch to have your back, because if you've got that cylindrical cage or enclosure where the cable goes, you haven't got that level of spare room in that cage for those cores to move, and you've got a double point of connection. Like, that's all you need. And it's crazy. It feels crazy that there were ever square cages there anyway.
Well, I mean, it's as simple as a round cable going into a round hole, isn't it? Completely clasping the cable in. At the end of the day, when the strands of the cable are going to spread out, and like you said, there's always going to be space there. We've been beating the drum for 10, 15 years now on it, and it's just like you're banging your head against the wall sometimes. But look, it's there as standard now, so hopefully we can convince people that that's the way to go.
I guess as the world of flexi-tails have come into the game as well, that makes that problem even worse potentially, because the strands are more likely to start moving about. So, yeah, it's a good feature to have in the range, and definitely one for you guys to be shouting about, because that will draw contractors towards using it. It's often what you might think is a silly little thing, but to us makes all the difference. So it's certainly one of the reasons that I was first drawn to M2, because we did used to fit a lot of those boards. The killer features of that was its depth. They were very shallow, and the twin terminals on the main switch, and bringing it into the Proteus range makes a lot of sense. So yeah, that's a really, really good feature. But it's not all just about the main switch. You are mentioning some of the other changes there. You missed one off, I think, Pete, around the plates that you're supplying with that as well now. So landing plate, I think you got a bit of stick for only putting one in the
Sorry,
box.
yeah, I did. Maybe I block out the stick.
Yeah, that's it.
I was called tight. But yeah, so basically a 10-way or above now will come with 2 gland plates rather than 1.
So, and these are the push-in little plates at the back,
the
back entry.
For the back entry, yeah. So a lot of it, people just compare what another manufacturer, are doing. Oh, so-and-so's doing me 2 plates. Can you do 2 plates? And we're like, yeah, we can. At the end of the day, a lot of these things, what we didn't want to do was be putting loads and loads of plates in there that's potentially waste. We're always conscious of SSV and trying to, reduce as much waste as we can as a business as a whole. So it's not the best look to send a load of plastic components out there just potentially going to get thrown away. So we were maybe a little bit cautious on it, but look, that's the change. It's the change that's been brought in. So.
And is there anything like, you see a lot of boards that have like the standoff brackets and things like that? Is there anything like that coming?
Very close, very close. To be fair, and I said this to Mark, I said we've not had one just yet, and we were the very first people to ever launch a spacer mount, as we called it. So don't let that be forgotten. But we're very close. Andy's just kind of in the final throes of design. A couple of final tweaks, and then we'll have one. So I'm hoping, again, by the time this comes out, I'd imagine we'll have one. Not only are we doing the full frame, this was something that you were asked, I think, Mark, and with the people we asked, we got about 50-50 response. And it's the same with what other manufacturers do. So you've got a full frame or like just 2 battens. Some people like the frame, some people like the battens. So what we're doing is we're actually bringing both out, and whichever one doesn't sell, we just get rid of in a year.
Yeah.
So at least we get that natural feedback thing, and we've not had to tool up for it or anything. So it's all been done with the tooling we've already got and invested in. So we couldn't decide basically, and it was really 50-50. So I just said, look, let's just do both.
Let the market fight it out.
And then if they both sell, brilliant, because it's just two options that we've got, and it's more route to market, isn't it? Because if someone only likes a batten or if anyone only likes a frame, if you could do both, there's no reason for them not to install your board, I suppose. So.
And is there any plans for like a double stack or anything like that?
Yeah, there is. Double stack, but probably would say the summer. It's just what's on the priority list, really.
Yeah.
We've already got the double stack, obviously, in the old style. So if people want a double stack, a triple stack, a quadruple stack, whatever size you want, we've got the machines, the manufacturing process to do that. So, we've still got a lot of flexibility. But yeah, in the new style, there's a plan in place, but it's probably going to be the summer by the time we get that.
Because that was something that was just floating around my mind in terms of, because I know obviously the double stacks usually have a link between the two, the first main switch, because we want 1 point of isolation for that full board. But this whole thing around current carrying capacities, whether or not there's something else we could do to have 1 point of isolation for that board and actually have and actually treat it almost like two separate boards. And this is just me completely. So there might be a really simple reason why we can't, but I'm just freewheeling a little bit. But whether or not there's a way that we can get effectively two sets of that 125 amp capacity in there, who knows? And I'm not expecting an answer, but
give him an inch and he's taking the page.
I'm trying to get to our 200 amp mark, and that'll be we'd be up at 250 amps there. So, but that's for the birds. I've not got to. I'm not expecting an answer.
I've certainly not got an answer on
that. No, I wouldn't expect you to. But I'm just trying to think, if we've got a limited amount of space and we know that we are struggling for capacity, and we don't necessarily want loads of different boards. We want to just mount one board in an area, whether or not a double stack with a supply coming to there and a supply coming to the other main switch might give us that capacity in a nice one, almost like one enclosure. But yeah,
just to sort of see it with the old sort of overnight tariffs, where you'd have a top row for your daytime and bottom row for your evening.
We do dual tariff boards. I guess it's the same principle, really, isn't it?
I guess one would be off when the other's on, but maybe that'd be the same with the renewable setup. There's an angle for discussion there. Do you ever see yourselves making sort of like a gateway, Pete? Because some of these inverter manufacturers, like Tesla, Sage Energy, Give Energy, they have their own product, which is a gateway. But with no disrespect to them, they're not always set up the best. And I don't think Tesla put switchgear in theirs, do they, Sam?
No, it's a nightmare with the Tesla stuff, and this is a big one out in the industry, and people fall very hard on, well, like everything, there's people that fall very hard on either side, and there's a lot of people that just don't have a clue which side to fall on in the middle. And the issue is that it's a plastic enclosure. It comes with a fuse carrier and a 88 fuse in with, it's like this comes with 100 amps, and then it's got a big DIN rail at the bottom where you can clip MCBs, main switches, RCDs, whatever you need in there. The wiring room is horrendous. Anyone that's ever done a gateway from Tesla, it's nice and compact compared to some of the other ones out there, but it's compact and therefore has limited wiring space. So it looks, no matter how much you value neat cables, you will never make one of them neat. I'm yet to see anyone ever share one of them that's neat, and we've never done a neat one because it's impossible. But we took the view that, and this was actually raised on our YouTube channel, and someone said, "Oh, how have you combated putting switchgear in a plastic enclosure inside the house?" And luckily, the video that they commented on, the gateway was actually outside the house, next to the main meter cabinet, and they were asking because they'd come across this problem. And I was thinking, that's a really good question, because that switchgear, let's say it was Proteus that was in there, that switchgear it's not been tested with that gateway. It's plastic for a start, and you're kind of like, it's basically a consumer unit. We've kind of adapted it, and it just falls right in this grey area where us as installers, we're not sure which side it goes on. And the easiest thing to do is to put that switchgear in there, because your tails come in there, tap a supply off that, and then you've got your circuit for your Tesla battery in there. But if that's inside a house, then that's basically a plastic enclosure with switchgear in.
It is. I think that's when manufacturers' product standards start edging into our wiring regulations, and it's a tricky one when they're not switchgear manufacturers, because Tesla won't be considering that, I'm sure, for the UK market. it's a global product, isn't it? That they think satisfies the intent of what they're trying to do. They won't want to make a specific product for us. But that's why I wondered if you guys had any thoughts on maybe
Not
doing
been
that.
discussed, but we can look anything. We can always have a look at it, so we can.
It's essentially it's all it's really doing is it's like a big consumer unit, isn't it? Really, it's disconnecting from the grid when there's a power cut through like contactors or relays, whatever the manufacturer's using, and then having all of the inverters and everything connected in through it. And the clever solutions these brands are coming up with, but there's elements of discussion around any of them actually complying with the regs. There's the Tesla that's plastic. There's the Sage Energy one with all of its buzz bars exposed in the way that they are, and mismatch of breakers that can still happen in the bottom of their gateway. And the Give Energy one launched with Type AC RCDs in it. Which, you know, we've got EVs, PV, battery storage in there. That really shouldn't have been happening.
No.
So it's an interesting conversation when you really get into it, and it all falls to our door, Sam, as installers, to sort it out.
It does, because also not all products have a full home backup system, and quite a lot of products have like an EPS or something like that, where basically the power flows through that battery all the time, and then there's like a little outlet that remains live even in the event of a power cut. So you've got like a pass-through current through the battery that's above what the inverter's rated at, and it just supplies this. It supplies this this point. Some people just put a socket on it. Others put, including ourselves in the past, put a little like critical loads board, and we move circuits into there. And we had a customer who was still ongoing with this because it's become a massive headache. Is that customer said, well, why can't we do something clever with this and run that supply through contactors so that I can run my home on that backup supply? 5 kilowatts, which you'd have to be sensible with we're actually going to remove the EV charger from the backed up side, but a lot of the other stuff, it's kind of upstairs sockets, downstairs sockets, this, that, and the other. And so a third-party gateway might be a really interesting thing, because actually these systems that don't have a gateway in-house, it would allow you to potentially run another cable back to that gateway as like the backed up load, and then through the contactors in that gateway, it basically switch over and run the home in the event of a power cut from that backed up load. So there's I think there'll be real legs in that, but it depends how much demand there would be for all of the technical kind of R&D. Again, we're sitting here; it's very easy for us to
suit our business models quite nicely.
Can you make me one of these, please?
Yeah, probably not 90% of the rest of your client base going to be buying it, are they? And
I would never say no to anything. I always have a look at it, and if there's legs in it, then
I know there's manufacturers. There's actually, because I posted something on LinkedIn looking for advice on this particular job, and I had a battery manufacturer call me to say, how have you got on with that? Because we're trying to compete with the likes of SIG or Sage Energy, and they haven't got they haven't got a gateway or anything like that. So there's probably kind of legs in it for supplying them to manufacturers of battery storage systems as well. So
I mean, we see changeover switches at a 3-phase level, don't we, that are made in like panel type boards by what you would call normal switchgear manufacturers. So you have a power loss and it triggers up a generator out in the car park. Similar sort of principle, isn't it? But at a smaller scale, a single phase level. It's probably a good angle.
Yeah, that's exactly what I looked at for this job. I thought, well, I could basically, instead of it bringing a generator on, it just brings the emergency power socket or supply, from the battery in. It's just replacing the generator. There's no startup. It's there, sat there, ready. But they're all massive and they're all 3-phase. And so having a smaller single phase one is probably all it actually needs to be. So there we go.
Give me some more homework, Pete. Every time you come and talk to us, you get sent off with research and requests.
Next
Won't
one
come
will
back
be
again.
I'm just here to launch my new gateway.
Yeah, that's it. But no, this is everything that installers are talking about out there in industry, and the problems that we come across, and the problems that customers are coming to us and wanting us to solve. And so there's keeping engaged, which obviously you have been through the change with the board and everything like that. Keeping engaged with those people on the front line, for me, is just so important, and factors into a lot of the decisions that we make as to which switchgear and consumer units and everything else we choose to use, because ultimately we want it to be as easy as possible for us to add to that installation over the next 5 years, because every customer we get, we'd like to think that we're going to have a really long-term relationship with them, and so we don't want to shoot ourselves in the foot by winning it on price at the start and then making it an absolute nightmare to do anything in the future.
Yeah, we've all had those jobs in the past along the way where you've done something and then gone back to the job and it's like, just done that a little bit different first time round, this would have been so much easier.
Yeah.
So we've all been there, and I think foresight of that, as you've been doing this for a long time, as we both have now, Sam, you realise that spending that bit of extra time designing things right and maybe taking a bit more effort in your initial install can help you out when that customer calls you back in maybe sometimes 5 years. And you go back and you've got a nice board with lots of spare ways to work in, or you've got some trunking around or a duct in the ground down the garden that you can reuse. Like, happy days, this is so much easier. Doesn't always play out like that.
It doesn't, and then that's the difficult thing, and it probably comes into into decisions you guys make, Pete, in terms of like we could design you like as future-proofed installation on our side as we want, as we could, but it would be $2,000 more than probably anyone else. And if they're getting 3 or 4 prices, that we're going to price ourselves out of that straight away. It's like it's almost trying to get through the door to actually have those conversations and add that in after you've been able to get your foot through the door. So you kind of go, oh yeah, they're pretty competitive. I like the vibe of that company. Get through the door and then go, for an extra X amount, we put another duct in the ground. We can actually upsize the size of this cable in case you want an EV charger in your garage or whatever you're in the future. It's a really difficult point to. It's a really difficult thing to decide when to have that conversation with them. And I suppose on your side, it's kind of like if people didn't care how much they were going to spend on a consumer unit, we could put loads of stuff in it. We could do whatever we wanted with it. But you've obviously got to try and compete with kind of people that charge a lot for their consumer units and people that charge next to nothing. And you've got to try and work out where you want to be with all of that.
Well, we had the balancing act of we had to bring out the board with all the best feature and benefit at a price that competed with that kind of lower end of the market as well. So it's a bit of a challenge. I think we found a decent enough balance on that, but it's difficult for anyone. You talk about future proofing now, but who's got any money to pay for things they might need in 5 years? And that's the problem. I think the country as a whole, everyone's struggling, aren't they? And you're saying, oh, if you pay an extra 200 quid, you might be able to get this in 5 years, but you're going to say, no, I got the 200 quid now, so what would I do? So it's not always an easy sell, like you say. It's how you have those conversations with people, I suppose.
It is. It's a massive balancing act, and it's trying to show that value to your customers, and for you, obviously, to your customers are us, and our customers are end users, either in the domestic world or the commercial world. And one thing I saw on Corey's story, which was really quite interesting, was the bigger boards that had the MCCBs in and the single or 3-phase domestic level MCBs and RCBOs in as well. It was like a split board. And I was thinking there's definitely some installs where that would have made my life a lot easier if I'd have known about that.
You sat next to one at the Apprentice 1-to-1 Academy when we used to record.
Yeah.
It's there on it. It's like we used that for that exact sort of purpose, what Corey was doing, to have isolation points for the bays, which we're using normal 3-phase MCBs for submains. It is a really versatile. That's more in the world of Ian, isn't it? That's one of his babies.
It is. It is. But obviously Ian's got complete flexibility, hasn't he? He's manufacturing everything that they're doing in Telford. So great flexibility to do those kind of jobs. If you or anyone else watching or listening has a job with those kind of requirements, and obviously bear us in mind on the industrial side as well.
Yeah, because it just makes life so much easier if you can have that flexibility with what switchgear you put into these boards, and just knowing that the flexibility is there. Because the amount of times you're searching for a product, and firstly you don't know what it's called because you've never used one before, and you don't know where to get it from, and knowing that you guys are really flexible with a lot of this stuff, like that visit we had completely opened my eyes to the fact the factory and the kind of the offices and everything. Then I was looking at all this stuff going out that was bespoke and everything. I was thinking, wow, this is not a company to be messed with. Like, we can actually we could specify things and it could be built, obviously at a price point, but it could be built and specified for that specific project. And that's a really powerful message to get out there, because it's not just a case of every job just needs a 125 amp three-phase board. Some you have these weird and wonderful situations where actually just knowing and having someone to talk to go, can we do this can this board, is it available and can it be done? And when you start on that journey of researching that stuff, you find that actually there's a lot more stuff out there than your standard 100 or 125 amp domestic boards and your 125 amp commercial boards. So yeah, it's really good to know that's out there.
Yeah, so you guys are active on socials, obviously, but you've also got the old school telephone lines where people can ring you up and ask for this stuff, can't they, if they want to get in touch with you about specific projects?
Yeah, I mean, we've got quite a good setup in general. We've got technical teams on both the single phase and the three phase side. So if you've got a technical question, obviously you can just call in and get an answer that you need. We've got a sales team all across the UK as well who come out and do your site visits with you, work through exactly what you need against, what we can do, especially from the three phase side, doing all your schematics and working on all that with you. Similarly, a little bit unrelated, but kind of related, on all the new products we're bringing out on the single phase side, every product now has a QR code on as well. So a lot of the technical calls we have are not simple, is probably the wrong word, but something, can I get this? Have you got a data sheet for this? But what the QR code brings in is you can scan the QR code, drops you straight onto the relevant page on the website. And if it is just something that you can find out from a data sheet, well, that's just pulled straight after the website. So trying to make things even easier than they already are. But yeah, if you do ever have anyone stuck for technical advice or whatever, it's pretty easy to get through us. It's not a switchboard and X, Y, and Z options you have to go through. It's speak to one of the girls in the office and put straight through to the relevant department, really.
And if you're wanting to go and see some of this stuff and get it in your hands, there's obviously CEF Live, which is big trade show at the NEC coming up. So it'd be well worth going off and checking that out. You're going to have displays of stuff, I imagine, and other bits and pieces out there.
Yeah. So I don't want to give too much away, but we've got a big stand, Proteus specific stand as well. So really keeping that brand identity, and if people want to come and see what we can do on the three phase and the single phase side, obviously we'll have a team on hand. So all the spec guys who work on the Proteus side specifically will all be on the Proteus stand as well. So yeah, it should be good.
And we've got a little slot on our stand at the installer show, Sam, that the crew from Proteus are going to come and fill for an hour and answer some questions on switchgear. So if there's any contractors who have a specific thing you want to know and ask in person, send them away with some homework like me and Sam often do, then come down and see us in that slot. We still need to set a full schedule on that, don't we, mate?
Yeah, we have. We've got lists of, we've got a load of people that have kind of half committed to coming on, more so on our side because we've actually not pinned down like some slots and everything. And it's gonna be pretty cool if all these people do commit to coming and doing a little segment on, I was chatting to a plumbing heating engineer I speak to coming in and doing a talk about Y plans, S plans, X plans, and all this other stuff, heating controls, and obviously if you can come down and talk about switchgear and depending on what's come out by that point, it might be a great time to chat to people about the heat pump side of things. But obviously, if it's out, and all that stuff, and we were having a conversation about taking some stuff like some PV Ultra, making some MC4s on some rails, some hooks, because we live in this industry of the renewables world, but there'll also be people coming down there that are thinking about going into it or have just gone into it, or are going there to think I'm definitely not going into it. But getting hands-on with stuff, I think, is really good. And one point I want to make about the new Proteus board is that obviously Proteus sponsors this podcast, but this board is really good. Like, I think it's important to note that there's always a risk that people can promote things because they're getting paid, but this board is the dog's doodads. And the full team are, like my team, are over the moon. The main switch, the switch gear, and actually how accessible it is to get all that switch gear wherever you are in the country, because we were nationwide. Like, all of this stuff just factors into the fact of this, we should have been on this. I know obviously it's a new branded board, and there's major changes that have changed within that, but anyone that's listened to this that hasn't tried it, especially now, like the DIN rail side of things is the new stock has been altered, all that sort of stuff. It is a fantastic board, and I don't want anyone to think that we're just saying that because of the relationship that we've got. And Proteus has been so kind in even sponsoring the podcast. But I know I wouldn't be pushing the board as hard as I am without it being a decent product, because that just devalues what we're here to do, and it is fantastic.
Yeah, I can only echo that. And again, I've worked with you guys at Proteus for years now. It feels like we're almost part of the same team sometimes, speaking with Spencer and Taylor. But I still spend lots and lots of money in my business every week on Proteus gear, and that'll continue to be the case because I really rate it. What I say about it is genuine, and you'll always have those angles of pushback. Sometimes you never fight away from that. It is what it is, but it is, like you say, a very, very good product, and full credit to you guys for bringing it to market, Pete, because it's a competitive space. There's lots of innovation going on all around that area of industry, and you're always seeming to be ahead of that curve, and that's not by accident. So as much as the bi-direction aspect might be, the rest isn't.
I'm not getting my head out the door.
You need those. You need those. Like, you need the luck to fall on your side sometimes.
You do, don't you?
But you also need to be engaged with the marketplace and find out what these challenges are that people are up against. And I think brands that might have loads of success, historic success in this place, and it's the same with battery manufacturers and renewables, manufacturers of EV charge points or batteries or solar inverters or panels. They can get to a point where they're really comfortable in the market, and I think that comfort breeds complacency. And I think what's really nice with this is you can feel the hunger for developing a really good product, and this conversation is testament to that, with testing it at a cost to find out it's 125 amps, and all that has to factor into a better end product.
Yeah, answering those questions as well, just the engagement of that. Full credit to you. We really appreciate it. I'm sure those listening along do as well. I'm conscious that Pete's got a football match to get to.
Oh, right. Okay.
He's heading up to, is it Bradford?
Bradford, yeah. Bradford, Notts County tonight. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
You don't sound like a local from Bradford, to be fair.
I was coerced as a young boy into Bradford by a relative, and it's not always felt like the best decision. But if they win tonight, they are top of League Two. So I'm off, because I was up this way. I'm off to see that tonight. So
fingers crossed
they get the win, and so 4 games to go. So hopefully get promoted back to League One, which is slightly less depressing.
Well, I think that's a fantastic note to probably take us out, really, isn't it? I would say, is there anything else that anyone wanted to raise that we haven't covered? I think we've given it all a good run through. So yeah, I'll take us out then.
Yeah, go for it, mate.
Well, thanks again for watching and coming back. If it's not your first time watching and listening to the Renewables podcast, we really appreciate everyone that contributes towards putting our name out there. Any comments that you put on the videos or conversations that you have out there are really appreciated about our little podcast here. If you've got any topics you want us to cover, any people you think we should be talking to, then please let us know in the comments or reach out to us on social media. But thanks very much. Thanks so much for Pete for coming and taking us through the Proteus board. Thanks very much. We'll see you on the next podcast.